All right, here we go. Everyone, welcome to Nature and Mental Health. I'm very excited to be co-hosting this with Morrigan DeVito. We are coming to you live from Las Vegas, Nevada, but I know that some people are tuning in from the East Coast as well, where it's quite late. And some of these people have been very influential to myself and Morrigan and to Red Rock Audubon in helping us formulate our thoughts and get a more robust and insightful picture into how mental health and nature often go hand in hand. So this will take about 45 minutes, and we hope that there'll be plenty of time for questions at the end. We have about 15 minutes to do that, but I am happy to go a little bit later than that. I'm sure Morrigan will be as well. So I'm going to just quickly, because I can't see Morrigan and I need to. Okay, there we go. Now I see Morrigan again. Okay, sorry about that. I'm ready to go. So yeah, let's dive in. Nature, birds, and mental health, how this all can come together to enrich your life.
Yes, and I just want to introduce myself really quick. So like Alex said, I'm Morrigan and I work with Red Rock Audubon. I do education outreach about birds in the Mojave Desert and in Las Vegas. And I also lead some mindful birding events in our community. And the reason why I do that is because mindfulness and birding are both very important to me. I started practicing both of those separately a couple of years ago. And naturally, they both just go hand in hand. And so because they are tools that helped me through a very tough period, I want to share that with other people.
I should probably tell people who I am too. Thanks for introducing yourself. This was one of those moments where I was trying to figure out how to get the slide forward. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, is it stuck? Fortunately, it's just that Zoom lag. So I'm back, I'm present again. My name is Alex Harper. I am the Education Outreach Coordinator for Red Rock Audubon Society. And I have an interest in birds. I have a background as a bird biologist and a birding guide, a natural history guide, but also have an interest in mindfulness and mental health. I have a fairly large family, and many of my siblings are in the mental health profession. My stepmother, who I consider my mother, it was also a career social worker in a high school at one of the busiest and poorest high schools in Miami, where I grew up. So I guess the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Even though I come from the world of science and natural history interpretation, I also have benefited myself from practicing mindfulness, seeing a therapist during very difficult times in my life, several times in my life, as a teenager, as a young adult, at different points in time to help work through different things that had happened to me, including some very traumatic things. And it wasn't until I discovered mindfulness a couple of years ago that I realized that it is a underutilized tool. I certainly wasn't utilizing it as well as I could have until more and more recently. And now I just don't really go a day without doing some sort of mindfulness training. And I think that it is best amplified in nature, or really amplified in nature. So that's part of my interest there. I mean, I could go on and on, but there's just not enough time in the evening. So let's dive in. We're going to start with some very broad definitions that we're going to kind of break down. So what is nature? What is mental health? And what is mindfulness? We're going to talk about city life and what this does to our stress levels and anxiety levels, what it means to be a human being in the city versus a more natural area, and how it's connected to our mental health. We'll be talking about how certain activities can buffer against some of the everyday stressors or even traumatic experiences that people can experience regardless of where they live, whether it's in a city or in the most rural of areas. And we're going to leave you with some protocols and some activities, suggestions that you can incorporate into your life or share with loved ones, friends, strangers, because we truly think that the best way to achieve some level of human flourishment is being more aware of the tools that exist. And mindfulness is a fantastic one for that. So I'm going to hand it off to Morrigan for this. She's going to go ahead and tell us what nature is.
Yes. So like Alex mentioned, it's a very broad term and has different meanings to different people. But to break it down simply, it would be the physical world, of course, like our mountains and our water and our ground beneath our feet, as well as all the living things in our environment, like plants and animals, bacteria, and of course, us. So you may imagine nature as wilderness spaces. Like if you're living here in Las Vegas, you may think of nature as Red Rock State Park or in the Spring Mountains, but that's only one type of nature. And nature does not have to be untouched by humans or pristine in order to be considered nature. Our cities are also part of nature, just like we are parts of nature. So I'm very happy to tell you that there is nature in Las Vegas. I was one of those people who thought when I was younger that nature was somewhere else, that it was outside of the city, and that made me feel very disconnected. And it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I moved back home, because I grew up in Las Vegas, and started practicing mindfulness in nature that I realized it was all around me anyways, and that I just had to learn how to see it. So mental health, of course, is also a very broad term and has different meanings to different people. But if we look at the definition from the American Psychological Association, we can see that it has components of our emotions, our relationships, our behavior, and all of these are little pieces of the bigger picture of mental health. So just like if you're talking about physical health, you're not just talking about sleeping well or eating well. Mental health is also something that has a lot of different moving pieces. And in this presentation, we're barely scratching the surface of it. But I do want to dive into our emotions really quick. So of course, we are emotional creatures. We have so many different feelings. Sometimes we can hold opposite feelings at one moment, and we experience feelings throughout our day, throughout our lives, and they come and go. So no feeling is ever going to last forever. But I do have highlighted here some of the uncomfortable feelings like anxiety, sadness or depression, and stress. Because when we talk about mental health, it's oftentimes we're talking about people suffering or having struggles with these uncomfortable feelings. And fortunately, as we'll see later, being in nature can boost our comfortable feelings. It can allow us to feel things like creativity, curiosity, awe, wonder, and connection with other people, with ourselves, and of course, with nature.
Thank you, Morrigan. That was wonderful. And you teed me up to talk about another term or word that comes with so much to unpack. And now it's my turn to try my best to describe mindfulness. Many of you on this call are very familiar with mindfulness. Some of you may be only becoming more aware of what it is. And so mindfulness is very much in vogue right now. It's being written about. The New York Times is starting to publish more and more about mindfulness. Scientific journals and scientists are starting to take it way more seriously, whereas before it used to be more associated with mysticism or more Eastern philosophy. But now here it's becoming more and more prevalent. We have apps proliferating and being downloaded constantly that promise a way for you to become a more mindful person. So what does that mean? Well, like mental health and like nature, there's a word cloud of associations. And mindfulness can be an action. It can be a practice that follows associated theories. It can also be a quality of mind or a state of mind that can be fleeting. It can be just moments long, or it can be something that permeates certain parts of your day for the rest of your life. Each person has different experiences with this, but it certainly practicing it more and more and understanding it more and more will help you get a better understanding of it yourself. But this is one of those things where I think you sort of create your own understanding of it based off of your own direct experience. And to sort of like deconstruct it just a little bit more, a certain level of focus or concentration is needed in order to achieve some, level of mindfulness, but it's only a part of it. And some people think that mindfulness is focus or is concentration, but it's sort of akin to like playing basketball, and focus and concentration are like dribbling. Dribbling is necessary to play basketball, but it's just one part of it. It can help you get to the basket where you're shooting, hopefully, the basketball into the hoop. Come on, computer. It is lagging, and I can't remember what my next bullet point is. There we go. So mindfulness, yes. So it's a practice that if practiced consistently, it can permeate into different parts of your life. And I want to tell you a little bit about my experience using it when I first got started. I had some buy-in initially because my family, being social workers, they tell me that they use mindfulness a lot with their clients. And so I didn't go through this period where I felt like it was just sort of something that was made up or came with some sort of mystical belief. I was certain that it worked, so I think that helped me to stick with it. And for the first few sessions, I realized that concentrating was difficult for me. And I was asked to focus on my breath. And I was asked to do that for 10 minutes. And what I realized quite quickly is that my mind was constantly wandering. I was constantly chattering to myself, and it was difficult for me to concentrate on the breath. And I later realized that that's the point. The point is to observe that that is how my mind already is. And it's not to achieve some greater level of well-being through mindfulness that lasts forever. It's actually just to create a perspective or an ability to observe my thoughts as they come and go. That's the utility or the point of mindfulness as I understand it. Maybe some other people have different meanings. And I sort of developed this ability to, as I see it, sort of see my thoughts as they're flowing, as if I'm also standing on a riverbank, observing this flow of thoughts and feelings and sensations coming up. And then later on, I sort of see it as I am in that river with those thoughts and those feelings. And so my kind of idea of it changed over time. So really it comes down to the ability to pay attention to experience. That is mindfulness at its core. And if that sounds esoteric, I totally get that. And to help kind of parse through some of the confusion or confusing language or analogies here, I want you to begin to think of attention as a flashlight. And right now, you're possibly paying attention to my voice or paying attention to the slides, but it's also possible that your phone pings and momentarily you are now looking at your phone, or a cat walks into the room, or a loud car goes by your house. And your flashlight of attention gets moved ever so slightly. And what mindfulness does is it helps you train to notice when your flashlight has been moved. And it also helps to train you to move or nudge your flashlight of attention back into the subject or object that you want to be paying attention to. And this can be anything that is seen or heard or smelled or perceived outside of your body, as well as thoughts and feelings or moods. We are constantly chattering to ourselves or thinking about things that are outstanding on our to-do list that we judge ourselves for not getting to earlier. I'm guilty of that. Or stressing about something that hasn't happened yet. And when I notice that that happens, I have this ability, because I'm practicing mindfulness more, to move a flashlight into a place where it's way more useful to be shining. And as one trains how to do this, these moments are, they're more illuminative moments, and these can shine more brightly. And hopefully you'll see more and more moments shining on the right half of Morrigan's emotion wheel, and having less and less time spent on that left-hand side of that emotion wheel. It's normal to experience all of those things, even throughout the day you can, but mindfulness is a way to cut down the half-life or the residence time of these more negative states and spend more time looking for the positive states. And so now let's talk about the city and challenges that come within the city. There are now 8 billion people on Earth now. We just passed that threshold there, or that, not that threshold, that line. And a couple of years ago, most people on Earth now have made their way into the city. So over 50% of people now live in cities. It used to be that we were in rural areas mostly, and less people lived in the cities, but now we're all kind of crammed into metropolitan areas. And certainly there are some like great aspects to that. Like I can walk out my door and I can go have any cuisine that I want, and I can be constantly entertained. I can constantly distract myself. And of course, there are things that I'm intentionally distracting myself with, and then lots of other things that I'm not wanting to distract myself with. I might have, cars going by in the middle of the night, bumping loud music, helicopters flying over, going to Hoover Dam or the Grand Canyon because I live very close to the Las Vegas Strip and the airport. I might hear a car alarm going off in the middle of the night. Oh my gosh, is somebody getting into my car? Is somebody trying to take my catalytic converter? I don't know. So there are all these things that are dividing our attention and oftentimes taking us into a more negative mind state or mood or condition. And what we'll start to get into is what happens in nature and how nature sort of does this more or less the opposite of a lot of these features of city life. And within the city itself, nature and natural sounds compete with artificial sounds that we create as human beings. And so there can be a lot of stimulation or a lot of overstimulation. And our nervous systems are constantly scanning the environment, especially if you are in an environment where some sort of negative life event has happened. Your mind will be wandering and scanning that environment, searching for that threat, even if it's unconscious. Usually it's unconscious. And that takes a toll on our psychological state. It takes a toll on our body. And it takes a toll on our cumulative mental health. Nature, on the other hand, ushers in more neutral or positive mind states under most conditions. You know, if I go to a park, most likely I'm going to go for a walk and I'm going to have a very pleasant and joyful experience. There are some features in nature which can be really stressful. Like I wouldn't say that a run-in with a brown bear charging me, for example, would be anything but joyful or terrifying, excuse me. But for the most part, nature, you're going to have great experiences. And within nature, there's that ability for creativity or insightful thoughts, curiosity to be sparked, and soothing and calming experiences to shine through. So that's a little bit about what nature can do and how our brains are in nature. And I wanted to know, Morrigan, if you would tell us a little bit about some of the few forms of meditation that one can do in nature.
Yes, of course. So these are two of the many ways actually to be mindful in nature. And at my mindful birding events, I will have people practice both of these. So I have focused attention, meditation or mindfulness, and open monitoring, meditation or mindfulness. So with focused attention, you are directing your wandering thoughts and feelings and attention to an object or a sensation. So that might be something like redirecting your thoughts to your breath. And then in comparison, open monitoring meditation or mindfulness is when you are accepting, kind of like what Alex was saying earlier, that your attention is always moving. You're not on the edge of that riverbank, but you are the water that is flowing in it. So this is the type of meditation that a lot of people might think of when they think of meditation. Open monitoring is usually done seated and focusing on your breath or returning to it as your thoughts come and go and as noises and feelings in your environment come and go. So both of these are ways to be present and to stay grounded. And when we practice them in nature, we can also feel more grounded and connected to the natural world. So let's pretend that we're outside and not on a Zoom call, and we are looking at this scrub jay on the left here. So if we're practicing focused attention mindfulness at an event, I might ask you to nudge your flashlight of attention back to this bird that's perched in front of us, and to take a really deep notice of its features. And if you feel your mind start to wander, you'll just nudge your thoughts back to the bird and maybe notice something new about it. So maybe you're looking at the different shades of blue on its head, or the different shades of gray on its breast. Maybe you notice the way it's clutching onto the branch, or the way its bill is shaped. All of these are ways to just stay present and focused. And of course, your mind will wander, but you have something to return to. So open monitoring outside in nature, if we were doing this, I would ask you to take a moment and just be aware of anything, any sensations or thoughts that you're having in that moment. So if we pretend that we're sitting outside looking at this scrub jay on the right, maybe it only lands in front of us for just a second and then it flies away. Then we would just let our thoughts or our attention go to the bird when it's there and then leave when the bird flies away. And then maybe we would notice things like the way the shadows are stretched across the ground, or maybe we keep returning to the fact that it's cold and snowy. So either way, we are being present, and in both forms of this mindfulness in nature, we can really just take a deep breath and be grounded in the present moment. And I really recommend starting these types of mindfulness outside, because as we'll get into later, being outside is very good for us, of course, and it's a little bit easier to practice these when you're outside because there's less things competing for your attention, and your nervous system is not as stressed. So you might be wondering, I mean, why do we even feel good outside, and how do we know that? Well, fortunately, a lot of other people have been wondering that, and there's so many great resources out there and so many studies that are being done and studies that have yet to be done about why we feel good in nature. So all of the studies that Alex and I are going to talk to you about for the rest of the presentation are peer-reviewed. They've been through the peer review process and published in scientific journals. And what a lot of studies have found is that roughly 20 minutes in nature every day, or about 2 hours a week, is considered a good minimum amount or minimum dosage to feel some of those well-being effects, to feel less stressed or less anxious. So if we consider that as our minimum, of course, we can spend longer in nature and feel even better. But for us living in Las Vegas, there might be a little bit of skepticism. I know there was some for myself growing up here when I thought about nature here, because it's so hot and because I live in an urban environment. But luckily for us, a lot of studies are finding that just because we live in a desert, we're not excluded from these well-being benefits. So is there green space in our desert? Well, maybe it's not quite green space, but the textures of our landscape are very unique and can still have positive effects on us. So a lot of the studies about time spent in nature are done in places with forests, places with a lot of water, a lot of gardens. But I did find one study that was done out of Texas in the Chihuahuan Desert. And what researchers did was they had people who were dealing with depression go out into 3 categories of spaces. So they had green space, which was gardens and yards, and then brown space, which was out in the desert with very little vegetation, and gray space, which was in the city with sidewalks and concrete buildings. And what the researchers found was that when people spent time in both green space and brown space, they reported feeling better and reported feeling less stressed and less sad. So that shows us that just because we're in a desert and we might be going out in a place without a lot of plants, we can still feel really good out here. And in part, that might be because of the fractal patterns in our desert. They're very repetitive and very soothing to look at. When we look out across our landscape, we see those patterns in our mountains and our rocks and in the sand itself. So humans really love patterns. Our brains are very calmed by patterns. So it's the same effect of if you're looking at the ripples on a lake, or if you're staring into a fire, it just feels good. It feels very soothing. Our plants in the desert also can affect our well-being. So plants all around the world, all plants are regulating themselves just like we are, and they regulate through pores called stomata. And through these pores, they will emit different chemical compounds. And some of those have been isolated, and it's been found that they have health benefits to people when we breathe them in. And a lot of those original research articles were coming out of cypress forests in Japan. But now researchers are looking at what other plants will emit those health beneficial chemical compounds. And I found one study that looked at the plants in the Mojave and Sonoran Desert, and they found that we actually do have several plants that have noted health benefits. So the big one is creosote, which is of course notorious for giving the desert that very unique smell after it rains. And creosote itself contains 30 different organic compounds that have different health benefits to us. And it's not just creosote, it's also brittle bush, saltbush, honey mesquite, and I'm sure many other plants that just haven't been studied yet. They can have different health benefits like antidepressant qualities, antioxidants, anti-inflammatory components that we can breathe in and receive. Now, with that being said, I'm not going to say that these are going to cure anything, and we still don't really know how much we have to breathe in of these chemical compounds to like get a full dosage. But with that being said, it is a really good reminder that we are physical beings. We are being affected by nature when we're in nature, and that our nervous systems are responding to these plants. And there's still so much that we don't know about why we are feeling good when we're outside.
Thank you, Morrigan. That was excellent. So we've talked about mental health. We've talked about some tools that can help you attain a higher degree of mental health, and some of the components of nature, including plants, that can also have these effects on our physiological or psychological states. But this is an Audubon chapter, and I'm a bird biologist, so I can't skip over what birds can do for us. And one of the beauties of birds is that they are everywhere. Right now, scientists estimate that there are anywhere between 10 and 11,000 species of birds in the world, and they can be found on all the continents. They can be found on the open ocean. They can be found at the tops of the highest mountains in the Himalayas, and they can be found in the most remote of rainforests. So not only are they abundant, but they make sound. And remember that part of what makes nature so soothing and therapeutic is the fact that there are these neutral sensory experiences that can be had. And a lot of that is visual. About 40% of our brains are actually devoted to processing the visual space around us. So that's a pretty significant amount of our brain space being devoted just to the sensory experience that can be seen. But a lot of it also has to do with sound. We also have the ability to hear, and what we hear can oftentimes soothe us, or it can do the opposite of that. It can be sometimes unpleasant, depending on your life experiences and your environment. But because birds are making sounds through song or through calls or other vocalizations, they are something in our landscape or our soundscape, if you will, almost always available in our environment, even the most urban of areas, the most densest of city spaces. They're going to have birds. No offense or buts. Even in New York City or Mumbai, you're going to have birds somewhere around. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the effects of bird song and sounds, talk a little bit about the community aspect of birding, or just community in general, and then get to a topic called the spark bird and its connection to awe. So the effect of bird song, or just bird noises in general. So many different research institutions or academic institutions are now coming out with research that they're publishing, and that eventually are picked up by other non-academic journals or publishing houses. People are starting to write books, but a lot of this is not common knowledge yet, that not only is nature as it is, as a visual stimulant, something that is good for us, but so is sound. And for many of the studies that are taking place where people are self-reporting their experiences in nature versus a urban area or being inside, almost always people are self-reporting better feelings of or more frequent experiences of well-being, less stress, less anxiety, less residual time of depression when they're out in nature. If you add bird song or bird call to that, well, that actually amplifies this even more. And this has been replicated in a number of different studies, which is really interesting. So being in a place immersed with bird song or bird call is actually more beneficial to you, especially if you're practicing mindfulness or paying attention. You're involved in the environment around you, not in your head or having a conversation on your phone. But being outside with birds around has these wonderful effects. And then there's the community aspect. What you see here on the right is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And this is a wonderful tool used in the psychological community. At the very bottom, you have our most basic needs being spelled out: air, water, food, shelter, sleep, clothing, and reproduction. These are some of the most important things that a human needs. And then progressing up that triangle or that pyramid, you have safety needs, love and belonging, esteem, and self-actualization. Love and belonging fits in well with the community aspect of birding. And it doesn't need to be birding. It can be anywhere where you are being seen, you felt seen, you feel like there's a place for you in this community, that you can be yourself to some degree, and that your place in that community is unconditional. And birding communities tend to be that way for the most part. I'm proud to say that Red Rock Audubon is a very inclusive group of people as well. And so a lot of people are coming to us looking for their love and belonging needs in that Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to have their needs met in the community. And for those that are bird watchers here, or maybe bird curious, I want to talk to you about the spark bird. So a spark bird is an experience with a bird, a particular bird, or just a moment in time where one is putting their full attention and their presence on a bird. Maybe it's a very common bird. For those out east, maybe it was a cardinal or an American robin, but something about that moment where you are emotionally, or whatever your mood is, has put you in an emotional state where you're ready to experience and be present with a bird in a way that maybe has not happened before. And I believe that this is probably a moment of awe moment. And awe is an emotion, and it's a very powerful emotion. And awe is an instance where something outside of your body is captivating you in such a way that it might make you feel, at least for a couple moments, like you're something, or you're part of something that is much smaller than yourself. And of course, this might just be a fleeting moment, and a couple minutes later, you're back in your own head, or back to the conversation you were just having, or back to your to-do list, or ruminating about something in the past. But for the most part, when these experiences happen, you don't really go back from them. It becomes embedded in your consciousness, and it becomes embedded in your experience and your working experience. And for many of us, we have a spark bird. I started birding quite young, and I can remember a spark bird moment for me, and it was with a common yellowthroat. And I remember that experience really well, even to this day. So maybe at the end, we can share some of those spark bird moments. But we're getting towards the end here, and I want to set Morrigan up to talk about some of our protocols. What activities can we do? Like, let's say I live in one of the most densest areas of the world, and life is stressful. I have honking cars, and I have lights going off like near the Las Vegas Strip, and I'm down and out. Things aren't going my way. Just life is difficult. What would you tell that person to do with their time, Morrigan?
Well, I would say, first of all, that getting outside, even if it's not ideal, even if, there are cars going off, is still good for you, of course. But when we go outside, if we are being actively attentive and diligent, I guess, or disciplined about setting some time aside to go outside, we can see some alleviation of that stress because there's always birds present, like you said, and there's always nature around us as well. Even plants growing out of the concrete are things in nature to look at and to wonder about. So I know for me, I definitely felt like I was disconnected from nature when I moved back home to Las Vegas. And I actually had a spark bird moment with a snowy egret that made me wonder about what birds we had in Las Vegas, because I had no idea that we had those here. And that also made me start birding. And like I mentioned earlier, around that same time, I was practicing mindfulness. I was just starting, and it all just kind of came together for me. So trying to spend at least 20 minutes outside would be my first recommendation. And while you're outside, to turn your phone off or to turn your notifications off, because you don't want that to be competing for your attention or splitting your attention between the blue light on your phone and the natural sunlight. And speaking of sunlight, it is recommended that if you get sunlight within an hour of waking up, it can boost a healthy amount of cortisol for you and make you more alert and ready and active for your day. So definitely try and spend those 20 minutes outside as a baseline, maybe right after you wake up. But of course, just get outside whenever you can, even if it's not right after you wake up, it's still good for you. And while you're outside, you can really really try and notice bird song and bird calls. And if there's a lot of traffic, you can try and listen for a bird and hold your attention onto that call. Like here we have the white-crowned sparrows, and they've been singing all winter long here. So we're very fortunate. And you can listen for them or for other birds and use some of that focused attention, mindfulness, to redirect your wandering attention to that call. And of course, you can also find community with people like at Red Rock Audubon or with your own groups of people and advocate for natural areas in the city and outside of the city. And with our Red Rock Audubon events, they actually run for 2 hours. So we will go birding for 2 hours. And if you feel like you need more time outside, then you should join us, because we're very friendly, and I guarantee that you will learn about the birds and you will feel like you are connecting with people while you're there. And I'm actually going to be leading a mindful birding event this Sunday at the Henderson Bird Viewing Preserve. And our intent won't be to ID the birds as much, and we will use some of those mindfulness techniques that I was talking about earlier, like the focused attention and open monitoring, to observe the birds that we find there.
Thank you. So Henderson Bird Viewing Preserve is where Morrigan will be this weekend. And you can kind of see that towards the right-hand side, just bottom right of center. What you're looking at here are just a few places where you can find areas that I wouldn't call natural, but there is nature present in these places. These are some of our major parks. One of the nice things about Las Vegas is many of our parks are free, including the Henderson Bird Viewing Preserve. A lot of people are surprised to learn that when they go to this place because of how well maintained it is. Some of these places are where Red Rock Audubon already goes, but some of these other places are areas with trails that may have water. Where you find water, you tend to find even more bird diversity. Some of the places don't have water, so there might be less bird diversity, but still plenty of birds, plenty of plants, sometimes some interesting mammals or insects to see as well. So these are some of the places that we go. And, you know, this is a city with 2.3 million people and growing. There seems to be no end in sight for our growth, but there are places, as you can see, to stop and get that mindful time in nature, get that 20 minutes in. Perhaps it's difficult for you to do that first thing in the morning or in the evening, but maybe you can see here a place that is on your route to work or a route to school where you're dropping off your kid. You're probably always within 10 or 15 minutes of a large enough park to get that peaceful time in. I want to talk a little bit about where we pulled some of our sources from. And we pulled a lot of our sources from the Mindful Birding Network website. Morrigan and I are part of the network, and a couple of very influential people to both of us are on the call. So we're feeling very fortunate, including people who have helped to put this website together. So you can check that out at the mindfulbirdingnetwork.com, and you can read through a number of the articles and journals that we referenced today, including some of these. So there you have it. That's the end of our presentation. We did 45 minutes. All right, you never know how that's going to turn out, but we did it, Morrigan. So I'm going to go ahead. Yeah, we did it. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and figure out how to stop recording. You think I'd be proficient at this by now. We'll stop.